The first time in my life. That's why I got carried away. So sorry about that. I
Yeah,
apologize.
No, I
it was
look
great.
forward to that, Rick.
We need more of that energy.
Oh,
This is
absolutely.
this
Whoa.
is the Open Global Mind Community Call on Thursday, February 6th, 2025. We have as our topic uh, the coup underway as we speak, as we live and breathe. And the coup is one of many possible interpretations. I will try to frame it just from my own perspective as an individual staring at what's going on. Uh, and I haven't sort of prepared remarks on this. I'm just going to kind of think out loud, but I'm really interested in how we process the moment. And that's kind of the topic for today's call. Uh, I think the moments where it starts to look like a coup and not a transition to a new regime, because transitions to regimes happen all the time. And normally the new regime then proceeds to pass legislation, talk it through Congress, do whatever. Here, what's happened is a bunch of ninja warriors have gone in to departments across the government and basically put a knife through the carotid artery of agencies like USAID and others, shutting them down in ways that are hard to recover. And that smells like coup, not not ordinary stuff. There were also lots of security clearances breached or bypassed in order for people to get their hands on staffing data, budget data, and really important facilities at the Treasury that disperse USG funds, which seems like a relatively important thing to think about. Anyway, so and happy to contemplate other framings than there's a coup underway, because I think that's a really important conversation to have. But I was hoping we could turn the call toward, and if that is what's happening, what is our um, what is our projection for how to handle this, and what are the important things to do, and what are the openings or possibilities? Gil is asking on the chat, why am I hedging so gently? Um, I think the moment you go to coup, Gil, the moment you sort of click into coup, you are in some other interesting space than normal everyday governance and politics, which is why I'm framing this as coup. But I think there are other ways to read the situation that might be quite different, and I'm interested in those. Um, so anybody who'd like to uh, either support coup or say something else, jump on in right now.
Morning, guys.
Hey, Jose.
Um, English is not my first language, so maybe I'm not understanding the definition of coup, but my understanding is that a coup is when you displace those in power. And this is a situation where those in power are displacing the system underneath it.
There's a thing called an auto coup, I think, which is sort of a coup within your own um, regime.
Sort of a
Uh,
cuckoo.
exactly, which is a very nice new framing for it. But uh, uh, it's a sort of a self. Well, it's interesting. Wikipedia has a page for self coups, but those are to stay in power. That's when you're about to be kicked out, and then you say, "Nope, I'm dissolving parliament, et cetera, et cetera." That's not what's happened here. What's
But
happened here is the regime coming in has overthrown the former form of governance, it seems.
well, that's what a good corporate hijacker does.
And that is a very good way of looking at this.
This is a merger and acquisition.
Uh, uh, damn it. So can I tell a little story just based on that? Many years ago, I had lunch with John Reed, who was then the CEO of Citicorp. And he and I were both expat kids. He was raised in South America partly, so we had something in common. We didn't really hit it off, and he seemed like a smart kind of quiet guy. Years later, I watched as Travelers, Sanford Weill, who ran Travelers Insurance Group, basically wanted to buy Citicorp, and he did. The only problem was it was an illegal purchase at the time. It was outside, it broke Glass-Steagall because it was crossing the boundaries of investment and banking being mingled. And so inconveniently, there was this big law, Glass-Steagall, that Sandy Weill managed to overturn, because we got Graham-Leach-Biley, the act that effectively removes Glass-Steagall, which I think is a huge problem even today. And as a result, I also watched as Travelers people came in and basically took over and did what's happening right now as a corporate overtaking, a corporate takeover of Citi, forming Citigroup, which now you see Citigroup and you see the red umbrella over it. That red umbrella is the vestige of the Travelers logo folded onto the Citibank logo. That's what they did. They did that. But really, I think Travelers ended up running the show. There's another acquisition story that I don't know as much about, which is Boeing basically merging with McDonnell Douglas. But a big piece of the MCAS Boeing 737 MAX disaster comes out of the culture, the old culture of Boeing that was superseded and undermined by the bean counter culture of McDonnell Douglas. And so a lot of, I think a lot of really bad things happened to the culture as a result of that. So looking at this as a corporate takeover, and Jose, when you say that, you're saying it's not a coup, it's just a corporate takeover, or what do you mean?
I'm taken back by the number of people who have told me that prior to the election that they liked the business ethos of those people. When I say those people, I mean Trump and his group.
Right.
And my argument was, well, they're not great business people. They've, gone bankrupt and they've done these things and those other things and so on. But they like the business ethos, the rough shot, fire people, get stuff done, do it quickly. Even if it's dirty, who cares? Just get it done. And that's what I'm seeing now is exactly happening. I've seen it in corporate. It looks no different. And now I'm seeing it in government, and that's what they want. So it's not a coup from my perspective when you're doing what you said you were going to do, how you were going to do it, and you're going about it as quickly and as efficiently as you can.
I think that's a really interesting proposition. I don't know that I don't know that coups don't get pre-announced either. I mean, you rally the troops, you tell them what to go do, and then you go do it. Some of them are kept completely quiet and depend on surprise and secrecy, but I don't think all of them do. So I'm not sure that declaring your plans ahead of time is a definitional part to separate these two.
No, but a coup, in my mind, and not arguing the point for any other reason, just the coup in my mind would require that the people in power be displaced with some other people.
Mm-hmm.
The people in power are displacing underlings and changing the systems in which those underlings are operating and closing and getting rid of and doing all of those other kinds of things. They are doing an M&A on a corporation that they want to be in their own view rather than in the view of those who they've acquired.
So in that language, I think you're talking more of a hostile takeover.
Yes.
Okay. As opposed to
it's a hostile. Yes. Many mergers in there.
I think hostile takeover is not a horrible framing here.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to distinguish, we have a long queue of people I want to go to.
I'll shut.
But if anyone wants to distinguish between those or help us there, that would be great. So let's go to Alistair.
Yeah, so I'm certainly not happy with Trump or the neocons in general. I'm just curious whether they would say that, well, FDR made huge changes to government in the 1930s, and what was good for the left wing is just as good for the right wing. This is just a right wing version of FDR. I don't know if they might use that approach.
Do you want to riff on that? I mean, like go a little deeper, because you're right. FDR created the Great Society. Sorry, the New Deal. It was LBJ
Yeah.
later did the Great Society. But the New Deal was gigantic, and the far right has been trying to get rid of all the programs of the New Deal since then. So was that a corporate takeover or a coup or something different?
I know. I mean, I'm happy about the the changes made in the New Deal. So I guess that's, of course, it colors my perspective, and I'm not an expert on this, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, of course, they're quite different because the New Deal was overall, I guess, helping the large numbers of poor people, whereas Trump's changes are going to help the billionaires more than the poor people.
The big difference, of course, is that FDR did what he did with the support of the Congress, and Trump is explicitly just walking around the Congress, ignoring anything that they've done or anything they might do. So that's why this is fundamentally different. Sorry, I'm in a car.
That's okay, Mike. Thanks. There's a piece of what's happening here which is highly unusual, which is, I think, a piece of this hostile takeover or coup is about creating an executive with extraordinary powers, and they have a Supreme Court that will likely rule in its favor and already has by basically saying that a president is immune from all prosecution, which makes me a little crazy. So we're already in those waters. And you're right, they're bypassing. The reason I said that like ninjas came in at night and slit the arteries of USAID is that that's what it feels like. It feels like there was no due process. There was no regular mechanism of going to try to shut down an agency. This was, let's just knife the agency in the back and see if it manages to survive somehow. Because the faster we get that done, I'm guessing that the belief system behind that is, if we try to go through channels and do this, it'll get held up forever. We'll never get it done. And then we're going to be sort of stuck in a quagmire forever. Let's cause chaos now and then see if the chaos lasts. Rick.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to pick up from Jose's point from a different perspective, which is the spirit and the semantics. So I picked up on the spirit of the word, not the semantic. And just for fun, I popped it into AI and asked, is Project 2025 a coup or not? And when I came on and Gil came on and he saw me shaking my fist because I was responding to the fact that I was the tipping point of the group for the first time in my life. I mean, that was obviously tongue in cheek, but what I think it speaks to is what I'm picking up here, which is sort of the the equanimity of dealing with a complex situation versus an emotionality. And I think there's a role for very constructive emotionality and reactivity that's controlled in a way as a counter coup force against the current government. We need a coup against them. Let's reframe it because what's taken over is diabolical. And, I've been diving into this sort of cesspool for a while, and I feel like I'm maybe making a little sense now, and using the emotionality of it, because that's what moves people. At the end of the day, voting is all about emotionality. It's nothing to do with the rationality of Project 2025. It's all about manipulating emotions and how to tip the voting. So the question is, and I was on a different political call, and I was listening to everyone talking. It was a bunch of Dems, and it was an amazing call of people doing this, that, and the other. But I put in the chat, I said, Dems can't organize a piss up in a brewery, and I would say that this group is no different in that we're a bunch of, Gil, introduced I think it was Gil originally who brought in the notion of symbolic capitalism. And, the question is, how can we get symbolic capitalism off its ass and actually do something as a counter coup force to Project 2025. And I've been floating this idea for a little while. We need a Project 2025 that mimics exactly what Project 2025 done, except it's completely and diametrically opposite to what it is to restore and create a new form of democracy to get us out of our cesspool. The idea of draining the swamp is we're beyond that. We're draining the cesspool now. And unless we start getting charged up and focused and say, what are we focusing on? What are we trying to do? What's the game plan to have the counter coup against the current neo-fascist regime? So I'm sure Gil will have something to add to this one. So anyway, I want to add a little emotionality to it because I think we need that galvanizing emotion and not out of control, something that's very measured and it's evocative because they've got the emotional upper hand and that's how they won the election.
Rick, thank you. You've kind of jumped ahead on the agenda to what you'd like to have us do, but I think that's great. I think I want to get a lot of those kinds of things on the plate. Gil, your hand may be coming down because your mic is open, and I think that when Zoom hears any noise on your mic, it actually interprets that as, oh, you've already spoken, I can lower your hand. So let's try and see if you can protect your hand raise by muting, which you've just done. Thank you. But let's go down the queue as it stands. Doug?
Okay, sometimes a little bit of theory helps. We are a republic, and a republic means that the public space is owned by the public. Res thing, publica. The coup that we're facing is one that is changing public property into private property. That's the transition that's going on. And it's huge and it's big. And of course, the particular owners that are emerging out of this do not have our well-being in mind. So the idea of a republic, that's the core to the kind of events we're watching, because it's moving away from a republic to the state as private property, which is basically a monarchy or other kinds of tyranny. End of thought.
Thanks, Doug. That's really interesting, and I posted the Wikipedia page for Res Publica in the chat. I want us to poke at the assumption that the people in charge of doing this do not have our best interests at heart, because there's a general philosophical difference between what role the government should play anywhere and how much they should do. And there's a whole mess of people on the planet who think government should be minimalist and shouldn't do a lot. And that is actually better for citizens because it remotivates people to do whatever. There's a whole series of arguments, and there's hours and hours of philosophical discourse that's been spent and that we could spend on down that avenue. But there's another interpretation of the coup or the takeover is that this is only about enriching the billionaires who already have most of the assets in the world. And I want to question that too, even though that appears to be playing out. But you know, that Musk has got his nose under the tent, or I have a thought in my brain. I added Musk is inside the wire, is what I added just like a day or two ago, because it's a little bit like, hey, there's an encampment, and you know, he is actually inside the fence. He has gotten through and is busy like wreaking havoc inside the camp, which is what it feels like to me. But I want us to not completely make those assumptions and take them for granted, or assert that we all believe them similarly, because I think that there's probably a lot of variety in our interpretations of all those things, as we're already discovering in this conversation. Stacy, please.
Okay, so I want to shift a little bit, and I'm going to give myself permission to speak the way Trump does. That means I'm going to give you my opinion. I'm not going to back it up, and I'm going to tell you that I know for sure it's the truth.
Can you lie a couple times while you're doing it? That'd be perfect.
No, but unlike Trump, I do not lie, which is the problem. That is the disadvantage right there.
All right.
This is what I want to say, and this is really why I've been here for so long, and what I've hoped to see happening that would be in place for a time like this. The way I see it is the strongest sectors of power we have at this time in our history is media and technology. Those two control everything, everything. And I have always felt, and if you, some of the, again, not wanting to offend anybody, but the actual worst people are the ones that have power within those sectors. And then you have people that will gravitate to them because they need to, because we live within a capitalist society. So our needs are involved with that. The reason I was so interested in the conversation about symbolic capitalism is I thought it may be a way to turn the light on to those two sectors that are not bad in and of themselves. And I actually believe that those are places that groups like this actually could leverage and have power to shift. Okay, let me jump because it's hard for me to pull all these very far away dots in together. I was happy to hear what Jose said. Jose is reflecting how a lot of people think. Because of the way media and technology is working together, they're keeping everybody below a certain level divided and fighting, and it's all over language. We have the ability to connect up in different groups without these big, powerful entities on local levels and change things from the ground up. But we have to look at why we're not naturally led to that. So just one quick example, maybe this will help. I was watching like the advertisings for Masterclass with Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yep.
And Noam Chomsky and all these wonderful things. And they promise you, they will teach you how to critically think. Why are we wanting people to pay to learn how to critically think? We should be giving that away. Just so, and I do think there's a way to do, I mean, let me ask you, how many people in this group would be willing to compete to prove that you are the best critical thinker? Because I certainly would. If they were giving like a free thing, you know, we're going to have a competition and we're going to put these people in this group through challenges to find out who's the best critical thinker. Everybody that thinks they're smart wants to play. To me, that's a leverage point, because when I look at the MAGAs that are not that bright, they think they're genius. And the people that know that they're not that bright think that those people are genius because they appear to make sense. So, okay, I just threw out a whole bunch of stuff and you could put it all together because that's the accommodation I need you to make for me. I'm complete.
Stacey, I love that. And it's also an extremely OGM-y thought in the sense of, for me, a reason I'm here is how do we elevate how humans get together and make decisions better? And that's about critical thinking. It's about all these other good things. And I would love to do that outside of this realm of politics and the game of power that eats everything, that sort of and destroys much of what it touches. So I love what you just put in the conversation. Thank you. Alex, then Gil, then we've got lots of people with their hands up.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Stacey. Because I jumped in when Gil's hand went down, if he so wishes, he can jump ahead of me. Gil?
He said, go ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Go
ahead.
Okay, good. Now protect your hand. Good. I've got you, Gil.
That was a good point, Jerry, by the way, about the hand. That helped me figure out. That was good.
Yeah, mute yourself when you put your hand up, and that should protect your hand. But it's not guaranteed because Zoom is a little sketchy sometimes that way.
You're right.
But thanks for offering that, Alex. Go ahead.
It tries its best. It tries its best.
And Gil's hand just went down, so we'll I'll put Gil, you're next. Don't worry.
Right. So I'll go back to the coup part. Coup is, as Jerry mentioned, has a lot of meanings. But what I'm seeing happening at the moment is, or how I'm trying to interpret. I'm not in the US. I don't know anything about the US really. So the thing that I have in my mind is, if it's going to be a coup, there's a difference between, and I may be wrong, but there's a difference between
to have the administration look children
Sorry.
and babies in the eye and tell them they are not
Doug,
US.
that's you. I'm muting you now. Okay, go ahead, Alex.
Right. So there's a difference. So there's the framework of laws and regulations and whatever else you can put in that need to be changed by statute of some sort, the houses and everything else. And then there's the other bits on top, which is at the behest of the governing people. Let's put it that way. It's a bit more complex in the US because the executive has so much power anyway. And they have interpreted that they have a lot of power to change a whole load of things. So I don't know which way is right or wrong. They're doing a lot of things very quickly because last time they were caught out and the sort of the momentum of frameworks and whatever fought back. And this time they're kind of trying to do things a lot harder, a lot faster, a lot everything, catch everyone. But the point is, my differentiation is, what is framework and regulation that they need support for? And do they have the authority to get rid of US aid? Because that becomes a moral problem, a government belief problem, or whatever. And that's the distinction I make. And I don't know the answer. I just thought I'd contribute that.
Thanks, Alex. Pointing to Obamacare or ACA is a really, really interesting precedent here, because one of the main missions of Trump 1 in 2016 was to destroy and remove Obamacare. And I chronicled in my brain, I followed every one of those battles. And there were numerous attempts all the way to the Supreme Court and other sorts of places to do it. And they mostly failed. Some of them managed to destroy parts of ACA, et cetera, but ACA still lives. And I think all the conservatives during the 4 years in the wild under Biden were like,
But they were
we
telling us,
we can't try to do that again. They were saying we can't do that again. We can't go that way. So, Gil.
I don't know what you just meant, Jerry. Who said they can't do what again?
Conservatives said we can't go the route we went last time because the first Trump administration was really disorganized, had lots of infighting, and nobody had really figured that Trump was going to win. Trump wasn't in charge the way he is in charge now. Everybody didn't go to kiss the ring. Everybody was like, oh my God, this guy won. I guess we have to figure out what to do. It was a completely different setup. And I think in the time away, they all said, let's figure out what actually to do. And Project 2025 is interesting. Has anybody seen anywhere a Project 2025 scoreboard? By which I mean, looking at the current actual actions of the Trump true administration, how do they score against the Project 2025 plan? Like how many of those things are actually being achieved? Because I would love to see that. I'm afraid it's a lot.
It's a great question. I hope somebody will go find that right now, because yeah, it's a lot. Look, this is I'm really baffled by this conversation.
Okay.
And it's actually the least interesting OGM call I've been on since I've been on OGM calls.
Anybody else feel that way? Raise your hands.
It feels like a weirdly, I don't know what the word is, but like sitting here arguing about whether this is a coup or not, when what's underway is underway, feels like an enormous waste of time. I'm not interested in a definitional exercise about that. We've got Project 2025. We've got the statements by these people. We've got Peter Thiel, who owns J.D. Vance, saying freedom and democracy are incompatible. Doug Carmichael put his finger on it. Don't get caught up with the notion of a general throwing out a president. This is people. This is a barely elected bunch of folks overturning us. This is not a king. This is a person who works for the people of the United States saying, I'm going to sever the ties and do what I want. Elon, the M&A thing is very apt. Elon Musk, remember when we laughed at him for spending $44 billion on Twitter? Thought it was strange,
sure.
Complete waste of money. So for $44.25 billion, this guy has bought himself the richest and most powerful country in the world. It's a pretty good deal. It will go down in history as that.
Gil, can I just interrupt there? My feeling on that point is it just wasn't him on his own. There was a plan. I think putting Musk there, saying he's the clever person,
Don't know.
it's part of a group. It's
Maybe
not.
so. Maybe so. Don't know. And and the relationship of Putin to Trump is still waiting to be unraveled. But this is a very forthright attempt to overturn the constitutional order, shift power. I was corresponding with a MAGA friend of mine yesterday, who, well, two things. One is that he said, absolutely great to shut down AID. It's filled with waste and corruption, and threw some data at me. And my thought is that, well, even if that's true, and I don't know that it is true, there are established protocols for dealing with corruption, especially when you control the Congress and the courts. You can do you can do a 90-day review and then take drastic action, but instead they cut it off immediately, taking away medication from people around the world who will die because of these actions, right? I asked him at another point, so do you favor authoritarianism when the authoritarian agrees with you? And he said, yeah, I do. So that's what the coup is about. The coup it's a coup against democracy. It's a coup against the constitutional order. It's a coup against we the people of the United States, res publica, and so forth, that Doug said. I have no idea why we want to spend our time arguing about whether it meets any kind of definitional criteria, rather than talking about how we're feeling, what we're doing, what we might do together about it. And I almost just dumped out of the call 5 minutes in. But I'm here because I love you all. And so I'm willing to be weird with you.
Thanks for being weird with us, Gil, and thanks for that. I spent time on those questions because I think the framing is hugely important. And the framing will dictate how we respond and what we think we do. And there's ways of interpreting the situation where the frame is dramatically different. And so I'm very interested in what this is a coup, let's just get busy, what that leads to, and what actions somebody in that frame would do. I want to go exactly there. So let's go there. Let's see what Klaus, Doug, and Rick have to say, but I definitely want to go there. But I think how we interpret the situation matters a lot. And sorry if you thought that was a waste of time, Gil. Klaus.
Yeah, I sort of feel very much like Gil and also like Rick. If it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a damn duck, right? I mean, why spend a lot of time, on this thing? I released a couple papers, one on Steve Bannon and one on Thiel, where they have loudly proclaimed their intentions and explained what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. Project 2025 lays out the blueprint on what they plan on doing. So why not believe it when you see them already executing on it, right? Eliminate the Department of Education is a big one. Well, it's out there. It's already on the table. So the question then is, how can a group like us engage and help? And it's not by debating the frame of the discussion, but by actually getting into it. Because we just have too many discussions where we're talking about framing the issue and then leave and then come back the next time and continue framing the issue, right? So what are we actually planning on doing? And I would argue there's a lot we can do, because the challenge here is to capture the imagination of people and help them see what how their actions could actually make a difference and engage here. So the first thing is to explain what's happening, right? So my paper on Steve Bannon, where I mean I'm actually working with the AI, having the AI explain what this is and how it works. And the AI actually came up with a video where Steve Bannon explains the current moment where the public and the media is overwhelmed by the speed with which these guys are acting. And that was the intention. I mean, they laid this out in Project 2025, right? That day one, we're going to just, cancel the workforce and what have you. So Henry Thiel and Elon Musk are obviously joined at the hip, right? I mean, they have a history of working together and building companies and things like this. And when you actually listen to Thiel, the guy is completely insane. I mean, you have a wealthy guy like this who believes in revelations and in mystical concepts of how our future as a species is going to unfold, and then you have people like that, with no connection to our culture, our civilization, the empathy required to maintain order, now wanting to make decisions. Who's gonna inform the discussion on the educational system? I mean, we can all agree that education needs to be changed, but how? To what? What's this going to look like? And I would argue this is where we can engage, right? We can forget about what is happening right now because it's unfolding. You can't stop it. There's a train coming down the track here. You can stand in front of it. You're going to get run over. It's just happening. It's unfolding. But my question then would be, so where do you plan on going with the Department of Education? Where do you plan on going with Medicare, with Social Security? What is or for example, with nutritional assistance programs, with Meals on Wheels, with SNAP, with WIC, very practical issues, that need to be addressed. And we can provide a think tank kind of support system, where we lay out options of how this could work. I mean, just to put some meat around it, take a SNAP, for example. The regulatory process around SNAP prevents the system from really working to its full capacity because it excludes, for example, family kitchens or nonprofit kitchens based in churches, based in nonprofit groups, to accept snack money and WIC money to provide low-cost meals that the private sector couldn't even compete with. But no, the money goes to Walmart, it goes to Kroger, it goes to Cisco. 70-80% of the money goes into that direction. Well, that makes no sense, right? So we could lay out thoughts. We could just take whatever, I'm working with Shimon Waldvogel, for example. He's a neuroscientist, so he's all focused on the medical system and helping women particularly understand how the nutrition they give to their children, even during gestation, influences their child's development. Those are practical things that we can do, but we got to get out of our heads, and debate frames and concepts that really have us just spinning, and say so. Hey, I'm an IT specialist. Here's what I know we can do, to provide education, for example, to provide AI support for the educational system. How could that work in a safe way, right? So that's sort of so I'm very much with Rick, because I work with several NGOs, and my gosh, it's just like herding cats, you can't get into any one direction. Everybody has an opinion, and by the time the conversation ends, what have we accomplished? Nothing. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I love our group. I've learned so much in our group, but this is a crazy time. This is Germany, 1933. Hitler took over the Reichstag with 34% of the vote, right? And then they immediately proceeded to dismantle the administrative state. And then they had the brown bags who went
Brown
out,
shirts.
brown shirts, who beat up everybody. Let me give you an example. I mean, I'm like very agitated in LinkedIn. So I had a conversation with one guy who was posting all this garbage, right? And I just pinned him down because there was just no way. I just with logic, here is, you obviously, misrepresenting this. So he sends me a note saying, well, smart guy, let's see when Dodge really gets going and they're loading you on a bus to drive you off, see what you think then. Okay, so that was an exchange on LinkedIn. So then I asked him, so that reminds me of Germany 1933. Is this what you have in mind? And then he, didn't respond for a while, and then he came up with some bullshit. Here's what we're going to accomplish, because he realized he couldn't step into this. But that's where we are. There are a lot of people out there totally ready to be violent with anybody who disagrees. So the way we frame this disagreement has to be smarter than what the Germans did during that time. And it's totally, history doesn't repeat itself, but damn sure this thing rhymes a lot. So I'm sorry, I'm done.
Don't be sorry, Klaus. Thank you for that. Also, Dave put in the chat some actual things we might do and ways we might structure looking at what's going on. I love that. Let's head in that direction. But Doug.
So, not to double down on where Klaus went, from Newt Gingrich forward, half of the population has been turned against the government. So this isn't a coup. This is destroy the government. It's the enemy. And those people are not going to be turned back. They're armed, to Klaus's point. And they're, itching for a civil war. Like that's the implicate driver for Bannon in 2045 and all of that stuff. In terms of Musk and Trump, the agenda is to burn it to the ground. It doesn't matter whether it's legal. It doesn't matter whether they're authorized or have the power to do it. They're doing whatever they want. The only thing that was structurally in place in our government to stop them is the Congress and the Republican control of that. And them being aligned with this burn it to the ground means there's nothing standing between them burning it to the ground and it being destroyed. USAID, which was a central foundational element of United States foreign policy, being closed, in fact, destroys trust, eliminates people globally, their reliance on it, and China and Russia will rush into the breach of that. So the whole world is in fact today destabilized. So thinking in terms of the existing or past history, structures, mechanisms, government, everything, values, constitution, like all that stuff has been rendered obsolete in Buckminster Fuller terms. Now, a younger generation, Musk and Trump are different generations. Musk is a younger generation. He's technologically armed and equipped. His cadre, his version of brown shirts are 20-something computer people that he has now managed to infiltrate and lay hands on the technology stack of our country. there is power in numbers. In fact, independent of government and all the philosophical and soft stuff, there is power in numbers in terms of people using things or not using things, people being sources of sustaining revenue or not being sources of sustaining, being sources of data that can be leveraged and valued by others and exploited or not. So I personally don't see a lot of choices for action, but I do see possibilities for applying that younger generational, purely technological, data-oriented strategizing of mobilizing individual viral action in the digital internet frame. Like there is strategic potential if, 150 or 200 million people literally close their Facebook accounts, stop using PayPal. Like there are things like that that I think could actually have an impact, could slow these guys down, could choke them. Ukraine, once Biden took the gloves, took the handcuffs off, Ukraine is now murdering Russia. Like they're taking out their energy infrastructure, not just supporting the military, supporting the country, the economy. They're shutting down oil exports. They're like, and I think, the American population can do the same thing to these digital terrorists, data terrorists. And with that, I'm complete.
Thank you.
Rick,
Gil,
can I just jump
go
in
ahead, Gil.
to say something
Go
about
ahead real quick.
to say something about data terrorism? I saw somebody post yesterday, I don't know who the source was, speculating that the Muskrat intervention into the Treasury computer systems, regardless of what they're actually doing, is a massive spanner in the works, because after that kind of intervention in that complex a system, you can't know what's been done. So the entire, even if they step back and don't do anything else, the entire system has been rendered insecure and has to be rebuilt, which is, maybe not a terrible thing at some level because it's a very ancient code and probably does need to be rebuilt. But this is, this is, I don't know what you call it. I'm back, Chair, to your first question. Why would you not call this a coup? And why are we even debating that? And what the fuck are we going to do? One of the things I'm doing is sitting here quietly waiting to see if my Social Security checks show up next week.
Yep. Thanks, Gil. Let's get to what the fuck we want to do pretty quickly, but let's go to Rick, then Mark.
Doug, I just want to say something, and I want to try and mimic what you just did a little bit by speaking slowly and deliberately. Because my experience of you is that it makes me think more slowly and deliberately and purposefully, which we need to do much more of. And rather than giving a alpha male mansplaining account of things, I would like to draw attention to a dynamic that I've witnessed before. And as someone who is on the margins of this group, and I'm quite happy to be there, by the way. It's not, I'm just saying I'm on the margin. And so it has a degree of the internal way in which power and control is used within this framework here and now is affected. So just to make a meta comment, who framed the discussion at the beginning, how it was decided, was that what people wanted to talk about or not? I agree with Gil. It didn't really, I got the spirit of what you were saying, Gil. but the semantics was a little off. And so I'm much more interested in focusing on what we can do about it. And for me, one of the two stumbling blocks is what is the governance of OGM and how we conduct ourselves. I'm so glad, Gil, that you wanted to respond directly to Doug. And I was quite happy to see that. I thought, great. Let's have, instead of, and I've made this comment before, but I think we need to have it doesn't need to happen now. I don't want it to happen now because it would be a waste of time. It needs to happen at some point because we're not doing what I would call generative dialogue, which is really creative and focusing on the problem. How can we do it? So one idea, let's put, actually, Mike, I have to give Mike the credit for this one because a couple of weeks back, he spoke about January 6th. How can we reframe January 6th? And I thought, what a cool idea. What happens if all the protests that went on February the 2nd were to be galvanized in Project 2029 on January 6th next year and frame it? I'd thrown up a few ideas, thrown some spaghetti against the wall, make America truthful again, equity, liberty, justice. I don't give a F as to what it is. We have to galvanize together. And they're doing chaos making, divide and conquering, so effective. They're just going to run rings around this intellectual nonsense. So unless we get our act together, very focused, what is the Project 2029 for this group? And in that article, I suggested we need not just one, we need 2029 projects from different perspectives, from every sector, beginning to align together to be able to restore the republic. So so I would invite anybody to respond to what I've just said rather than going Q if we want to break out of the mold. That's what I would suggest because mansplaining doesn't go very far.
Mark has been very patient. I'd like to hear what he has to say.
I just wanted to add a parallel course of action that is worth thinking about, in addition to the thinking about and how do we fight back and kind of stop these forces from going any further. I've read a lot of kind of historical books about these 100-year cycles. Neil Howe wrote a book called The Fourth Turning. Ray Dalio calls it the big cycle, and he made it a lot more approachable recently. There's a good YouTube video if you just search the big cycle. And it's essentially just kind of like something else to hold in our minds, as under the assumption that maybe these forces are bigger and unstoppable at this stage. And what the recommendation is from those authors and those people is that you also kind of form a close-knit group of people that you can depend on, a support network, people to get through harder times. And I like the analogy that they gave, calling it it's like a winter. It's like these cycles are like seasons. There's the spring, the summer, the fall, and the winter. And this one they all call the winter. And it's about 80 to 100 years after the last one, which was World War II and the Great Depression. And when you're faced with winter, you prepare for winter. You don't fight it, right? You get your supplies in order. You make sure you have enough wood and food. You have all your tools together. And it doesn't mean you stay indoors, do nothing in the winter, but so there is something, still action that isn't preparation, but I think it's worth also thinking about the preparation for this, because it's kind of like, maybe the fight wins and you can push back on this, but maybe not. And it's also worth being prepared in the not case.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, Gil writes in the chat, be very careful about opinions. This is unstoppable. Those are the kinds of statements I'm trying to identify so that we can keep a little flex in our minds about what's going on, which is why I took us originally down the semantic question about how do we frame this, because accepting the democracy is being overthrown frame and going down that path is useful, but it's not the only way to think about where we are. Klaus, then Kevin.
Yeah, so I'm very much in the same line of thinking as Mark just explained. You got to get ahead of the curve. One principle that Steve Bannon articulated also in this paper that I sent around was that they intend to keep the speed of change so fast that it keeps you off balance, right? So the public is spinning around what is just happening, and by the time you think you finally cut up, something else happens and something else happens, so you keep spinning, but you don't know how to get ahead of it. So, and yet what you have is a clear blueprint of where they are going. We know what they're going to do, and it's in process. It's just like Gil mentioned, the computer systems are compromised. The entire core of the government has been compromised already. It's done. So where does it go next? So to get out of the spinning mode, and to become a stakeholder in the discussion going forward, right? That means that we have to accept that the Department of Education has been canceled. We have to accept that the cabinet positions have been filled with people whose mission is to disrupt the department they're supposed to lead, right? So that's a given. So then the question, then no one talks about, okay, we got it. You want to disrupt, you want to lead. Where to? Where are you going with this damn thing? What do you have in mind? And who's going to be involved? And who's going to get to make these decisions? And then we can engage and educate and support stakeholders, average citizens, people who, NGOs, people who are participating in equipping them with talking points and with ideas, of how they can engage in the process. And so if you want to change the educational system, well, let's talk about this. Let's get engaged with particularly women, who have children in school and who are going to freak out once they understand what is rolling out here without any of their input, right? So that's what Mark is saying. If there's winter coming, get yourself a coat and some gloves and some good shoes, right? And we are not talking about this. We are exactly in the trap that Project 2025 has laid out, and Steve Bannon, one of the key architects of this. And let's face it, I mean, the guy is brilliant, right? In just sort of a nasty way, but that's exactly what they have in mind, is to keep you spinning, so you cannot step back, consolidate your thinking, and then engage in multiple levels, right? Because we have skill sets that range across every segment of the industry. So let's use it. Then we have AI, and AI, I mean, I just went into a quantum leap with my AI capacity. And so this thing has become completely conversational. And it's absolutely incredible, because you can have a discussion where one partner goes out and does a web search and comes up with anything you need to maintain this conversation in real time, right? So we have the capacity. It's like think tank quality material here to engage. So let's do it, right? I mean, let's think about where can we all have access to social media. I'm using LinkedIn, and I have huge volume of hits. Now I have 10,000 hits on my opinions. So we can do that. And that's sort of my let's let's realize we're being manipulated, and it's working.
Agreed, Klaus. Thank you. Kevin. You lowered your hand, but you didn't unmute.
Yeah, I just have to say I like OGM as it is. It is not a vehicle for action. People have called for it. It isn't. It won't be. That's fine. You know, you can do actions and report on them here. You know, I'm taking action where I have leverage. One place that I'll do in a more OGM context is getting 3 groups together who are using AI to do cultural and spiritual value. The Wisdom Lab folks have done kind of wisdom in the workplace, make it livable for a dozen years. Now they have a human relationship to AI, and they've got an app that's interesting. Indigenious is using AI to help revive nearly dead indigenous languages and make younger people able to know how to pronounce things and stuff like that. And then Latimer's doing black chat, and you know, because there's so much inherent racism they're blind to in AI, but they're hooking up HBCUs to learn how to be around that, but they're also digitizing James Baldwin's stuff. So, you know, you can create human-centered stuff around AI. The 3 stories together can get on some tech events. You know, we can say, look, here are 3 ways to be human in the context of who you are and in the context of who you are spiritually. But you know, saying on this forum, what are we going to do about the Department of Education is useless. I don't have any time for it. We won't do it. And you know, I refuse to play that game. I put on I have leverage where I can, and you know, I refuse to wring my hands about Washington. That's all I have to say about it. It's a waste of time, and that's, I think, what they want you to do. Live and worry about things you can't impact.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm very mixed on what you're saying, in part because I think that sharing possible actions, some of us will then go do some of those actions. I don't think OGM as a team or a group is going to do them at all. I agree with you on that. But I think that what we're trying to do is lay out opportunities or possibilities for every person to put their personal energy into. And at that level,
OGM has no history of taking action, you know, in a meaningful way other than maybe Neo books. I think you should join a local action group or about a topic. But this is a great forum where we talk about things. It's, you know, if Nike says do it, we contemplate the prospect of action here. I think it's a wonderful place to contemplate the concept of action. It is not a place to do it. And then, to me, that's fine.
Sam, you've been very patient, and your chair has been occasionally empty there when it was about time for me to pull you in, but I'm glad you're there now.
Thank you. I've got a sick kid again here.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to say thank you so much for that. Like, I'll just say it again. Politics is the entertainment division of the military-industrial complex. That's how I see it. And I think getting hand wavy and, you know, oh gosh, I mean, I see that on both sides of the aisle, and I hear very compelling arguments, you know, about, you know, the elites are doing this and the elites are doing that on both sides, and you know, and or like there's a cabal of people who are doing this or doing, you know, and to me, like what I think is missing is first principles thinking here, which is why is Trump compelling, you know, and what in our narrative is turning off those citizens, those people that we need to consider. And I'm just going to read this from some blog, I forget. I believe what happened with social justice ideology is that it's gone through a process of abstractive sublimation, in which practical concerns by minority groups, which may be dangerous to the status quo, are sublimated into the realm of abstraction that allows elites to reframe and ultimately ignore its calls for redistribution of power. It is adopted into the world of theory and language games that elites are much more comfortable playing than working class people. In that realm, social justice ideology is transformed and takes on new functions. It is used as a way to signal progressive status by displaying care, to conveniently minimize the complexities of minority experiences, and to set the rules around what is or isn't acceptable discourse. It also functions to keep outsiders out unless they can play the game on the same terms and, by extension, adopt the same values as the elites, which can be changed and controlled to maintain the status quo. So I just feel like we're all being manipulated. There are people there are power structures in place, and of various flavors, elites and counter elites. This particular article was Peter Turchin, I forget his name, the article about elites, that these winters, as it was described, these times of chaos and destruction are precipitated by overproduction of elites. And so there are too many chiefs and not enough Indians. Sorry for the terrible metaphor, but and so they're all vying for power, and and so there's the elites and the counter elites, and sometimes the elites are in power and sometimes the counter elites are in power. And we're in maybe we can call it a counter elite, or I don't know if we would call them elites now. I mean, I don't know what it is, but you got the Republican variety elites and you got the Democrat variety elites, and and they kind of all do different things. And at some point, no, because nobody really has a good plan. I mean, we have how many $1 trillion deficit? We have expanding risk on so many existential risks, like synthetic biology. I don't think anybody here understands how dangerous that is, And I mean, I don't know if you do, but I'd be happy to talk about it because it's one of my major concerns. And with engineered viruses and cloning for the billionaires and all that stuff. And we have environmental collapse and all this political and economic turmoil and all these things. Like no one in the Democratic Party has good solutions to those. They're kind of, in my opinion, a lot of business as usual type stuff. The Affordable Care Act was great. I was really happy because I needed healthcare, but it was also a big handout to the pharmaceutical industry. And and at some point we have to say, can't we do better? Can't we actually, and I think that if we triangulate, there are real positions and real concerns. Steve Bannon has always been a Darth Vader character to me, And I watched, at the behest of one of my brothers, an interview with what's her name, Shanahan and Bannon, and I was like, okay, he doesn't strike me as a Darth Vader character. Like he's saying things that I actually believe, which are that there's a lot of waste in our government that needs to be addressed. There are powerful forces that are not elected that are operating all the time, including in the political parties, and in the political parties you have power elites and people that are controlling the discourse and sort of manipulating everybody on both sides of the flavor, and the flavor aisle. And so it's mama. So I don't know, I just say keep it in mind. I mean, there's you have to listen to be able to come up with a compelling counter narrative. You have to actually listen, to the argument. And these aren't boogeymen, these are human beings. People who voted for Trump are not deplorables. They're people. And they're not stupid. They just see things differently. And, and if we're going to be able to come up with an argument that takes into account our concerns, which are the environment and, social equity and, long-term thinking on all sorts of scales, then we're going to have to listen to, we're going to have to listen to what the other people are saying. I mean, everybody's busy saying, well, we have to just counterattack. Well, maybe we do, but maybe we need to actually come up with something more compelling. I mean, that was like the famous argument from the hippies around the Vietnam War. Why are we attacking? Why don't we just make better music, and make better culture and more inclusive and more exciting and visionary, so that we don't have to blow up Pol Pot or whoever it was, not Pol Pot, but we just the people will see what we're doing and they'll say, hey, you know what, that sounds better. That sounds like they've addressed my concerns. And so that's my call to, you know, pacifism, and call to like nonviolent communication, and call to, you know, mediation. And, you know, it's just stop seeing everybody as the enemy and start listening, actually listening to the things that are driving these narratives. And, you know, we may have differences of opinion, we surely will, but I think we have good conversations, then we can triangulate somewhere where, you know, we you know, the bottom line is we all have the same needs. We all have the same basic needs and basically the same fears too. They just, the boogeymen have slightly different masks on. That's really how I see it. And I think that if we approach these conversations in this way, the way that we handle these types of crises like that, I just think we're going to get more done in the long term. So that's my 2 cents. And with that, I do have to go, but I have a big call from a potential investor in my newly launched Forby.io. And so actually I took on my first investor, so that's great. And and I'm having a really great ethical debate with a really serious ethicist, which I'm going to record, about open source versus closed source, nonprofit versus for-profit, given that I want to saturate the culture and the world with the possibility of transparent, direct governance that could possibly transcend these silly power struggles that we have because of the structure, our power structures. So, so I'm going to have that, and I'll post that. I'll have that ethical drilling on Friday, and I will post that later. But anyway, thanks, Joe.
Can you just enter your website on the chat? So
yeah, Forby.io.
Yeah, it's like for the people, by the people, for by.
But pronounced Forby.
Because for by sounds like a building material. I don't know. Maybe I'll change
it. It's good.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody.
Sam, thank you. And I just want to take a second to take a beat and breathe, and also say, mostly we lean left on these calls, and we seem to have pretty different opinions about what's going on. And those opinions show up here, I think, really nicely. And I appreciate how they overlay with one another, and the general effect of, oh, wait, there's different ways of thinking about the situation. So it takes a lot of patience sometimes to listen to people whose opinion is considerably different from ours. And I'm extremely interested in what action items each of those opinions represents or means, and then in comparing those sets. So this is a coup, we must act urgently means this, this, and this. And we haven't had a chance here to play that out. And maybe that means trying it again next Thursday, but talking 90 minutes once a week doesn't lead to the kinds of quick action that we need to do. So I just want to kind of say that I really appreciate everyone's patience in listening to and trying to absorb each of our points of view and then making something bigger out of it. Gil.
Thanks. I was going to respond to Kevin and Mark and not to Sam, but Sam, you said some stuff. Did he just vanish? Whoop.
He just left. He just had to go to another call.
He said some stuff toward the very end that I really appreciated. First of all, yes, we did make better music. Let's just be clear about that. But you know, I've what he said about listening and not writing off the people that we differ from is something that I've been, you know, saying and absorbing for many years now. Ken and I have talked about this a bunch on the Living Between Worlds calls about the deep importance of listening to the other and listening deeply for what people care about, and finding out where we have common cares and different interpretations about them, and see what we can do to take care of them together. That said, there are also times where that, you know, where, how to say this cleanly, there are times for dialogue and there are times for fight. I guess I'll just leave it at that. Bannon is fascinating. I really encourage people to read his conversation with Ross Duth out of the Times. Both there's text and podcast version of it. And one of the things that struck me was how similar his analysis and Bernie Sanders' analysis are about the, basically the abuse of the working class in the United States, to put a very short headline on it. They go very different directions about what to do about that, very different directions, but there's a common frame that's very different than the mainstream frame that they both share. And there's interesting dialogue to have with people like that. When that turns into policy and action and impact on real people's lives, then there's a place for resistance. And I'll say something about resistance in a second, but well, let me do that now. Mark, you talked about winter is coming. That's a fact. You just got to deal with it. And I'd say it's an opinion, not a fact. We certainly have to deal with what's coming. We have to think about what, where self-protection is and so forth. But the thought brought me back to members of my extended family who lived in occupied France during World War II, and were members of the resistance. And they put on their overcoat for winter. And one of these people, who was a 14-year-old girl, would ride her bicycle through the streets of the town, and she would smile at the Nazis who were on the streets. And in the basket of her bicycle were things that were critically important for the resistance, whether papers or weapons, what have you. So she was living at two levels. She was adapting to winter, and she was resisting in substantive ways that made a real difference in the lives of people. So I just offered that. Kevin, I really appreciate what you said. When I said, what the fuck are we going to do? I did not mean what should we do together as OGM as a project, because I've often, I think, pretty consistently spoken against the notion of us trying to do that. There are many projects in the world. I love the ones that you've talked about. And so one of the things that this forum is valuable for me, is sharing the news and the ideas about those things, about what's happening, how does it feed my imagination, how might I support you, who can I introduce other people to, how do we use our rich connections to connect each other up more powerfully and feed each other and support each other in the work that we do. So it's a kind of doing together that's not a doing together project. It's doing together this, and I really value it a lot. And last but not least, I'm sorry I don't have the link that I was looking for here, but Yanis Varoufakis, former Greek finance minister, has been posting some incredible stuff on YouTube lately, very relevant to this. So I'll see if I can dig some up and post it into the email. I think I stuck one in the chat up above, but it's a very different analysis than you find certainly from the American media and even from the American left. So worthwhile. I'm complete.
Thank you, Gil. Thank you, Gil. And I'd love to know how that fits into the framing I was playing with at the start of the call, because I think that a very different perspective is what I'm partly looking for. And I want to feed that into at least how I respond and what I think I'm doing. So
very, very, very briefly, and some of his overlap with Bannon is they are both talking about techno-feudalism. And we, and the nature of oligarchy. And what we're seeing now, and kind of the classic definition of oligarchy, is a tight alliance between titans of capital and titans of political power, and deals that they cut with each other to exchange power and resources with each other. It's classic in Russia. It's what I see as the design of what's going on here. But the other aspect of techno-feudalism is, hypothesis from Bannon is that Trump and gang cut a deal with the barons of Silicon Valley to say, we will give you unlimited access and minimal regulation and make a shit ton of money as long as you do X, Y, Z in return for us, to make it very simple. The economic analysis of techno-feudalism, I'm not cogent enough this morning to go into, but I'll see if I can dig that up for you, and I encourage people to have a look at it. It's a shift, he says, from classic capitalism to feudalism, different kinds of relationships of production and economy, and a way for a few people to collect rents from the rest of us. And we, all of us, sitting here right now, are dependent on the techno-feudalists in most everything we do.
thank you for that summary, Gil, a lot. Rick.
Well, it's a lot to assimilate, and I want to start by saying I agree with Kevin, but I would like to agree with a twist on it, and it elaborates on what Gil just spoke about. And that is, how can we individually and collectively, within this and outside of our various domains, be more compelling in the line of thinking that Sam was alluding to earlier? And you know, the frame that came to mind for this group, and it may not fit for people, which is fine. How do people frame things differently is incredibly important. It was how can we be an incubator for catalytic innovations for Project 2029? Now that's a lot to take in, and I'll just put the thing in there to let people muse over if it captures people's moral imaginations. But I do want to agree with a twist with you, Gil, about the music. Yes, the music was amazing, and if people haven't watched the Netflix series 1971, the year music changed everything, it's a phenomenal tour de force of 5 sessions on all the music of the era. I was totally inspired. It was a trip down memory lane. On the other hand, it was phenomenal for consciousness raising, and it was highly symbolic. And it's symbolic in the same sort of way that symbolic capitalism, it's good for consciousness raising, but it takes a lot under the hood to make systemic changes. Had that revolution been effective, we wouldn't be in this pickle now, which suggests that we need to be much more systematic, methodical about how we build the infrastructure supports politically, socially, and economically to annihilate any possibility that Project 2025 in any version in the future does not arise again, which means you have to develop a highly anti-fragile institutions that will have to be able to respond early when the ugly side and the dark side starts rearing its head again, which it will, guaranteed. But can we become more anti-fragile in doing that? So, and one last point, I mean, we all have a tendency to be along different parts of the spectrum between sort of peace activism along the line that Sam was talking about and political activism. I enjoy playing both poles, and I share 2 songs that I wrote that are clearly political protest songs. They're designed for paradoxical interventions that I know some people will find offensive. And, you know, if we can learn anything from the AIDS activism, which is the ACT UP, things would not have happened if it wasn't for political activism where you are challenging the status quo. I would say not even resisting. You're going on the offense. It's not resistance. You have to go on the fence. So my question is, how can we effectively go on the offense, not resist? Because if you're going to deconstruct something, you have to go on the offense. And that falls into the war metaphors and all the shortcomings that has. But if it's not grounded in peacemaking frameworks, then we're not going to be able to make long-lasting systemic change. And these are all wicked problems. And lastly, I want to call out David Witzel, because a while back he shared the documentary Join or Die. And I think if we come here sharing our own personal examples of how we're trying to do something different, and I'll give you one example, and I welcome you can, here's a place where we can come and share ideas, and then you can say, oh yeah, I think I can do that one in my own community or in my own group. I suggested Project 2029 as an idea. Does that catch fire? I have no idea, but I'll give you one example. So in our neighborhood, I won't go into, I'll give you a very short story, which is I'm having the neighborhood association coming over next week to watch the documentary Join or Die about how to enhance the social capital within the mixed neighborhood that I live in. And it's socioeconomically diverse with a school district, which is a multicultural school, which is under-resourced. So that's my example of what I'm trying to do. And I'll give a report later on. Well, I tried this. This is what happened. So can we come and share our stories of where we think we're having small and large impacts in our various activities?
Thanks, Rick. Stacy. There you go.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. And I love that idea. I'm going to add an example of my own in the chat. So I had put something in the OGM mailing list where I'd come across something on Facebook. I didn't have the bandwidth to deal with it. And Klaus sent me what I needed, which was an AI rebuttal. Let me first say that, Gil, I resonate with that 14-year-old girl. And I want to point out that she wasn't the one that developed the resistance materials that were in the bicycle. So let me put this in the chat. So I can't even do that. What I did is Klaus gave me the material I needed. I went back to the Facebook group. I'm posting the email that I sent to Klaus to give him some feedback of what happened. And I explained my strategy and how I did it. Right, that Facebook link is there. It's still a work in progress. Jack Park talks about avatars. When I'm on Facebook, I'm the avatar of Stacy. I'm absolutely me, but I couch my words or I say things a little bit differently, but I'm still me. What I'm trying to do in this situation, I should just read this because I can't even get it in. Okay. So I was explaining, I said just a little background about some of the other characters because I'm talking to two women. And okay, Blank is an extremely devout Christian who's also, in my opinion, a great learner. She served in the military and has been representing herself in a court case pro se. I've seen her work and have had lawyers agree that it's top notch. To summarize, she is civic minded, has integrity, is a good learner, questioner, and highly faithful. She's a natural leader that is connected to the religious community. Her views are conservative, and she made it clear to me during the election that nothing would sway her from voting for Trump, so I stopped sending information. Lucy, I don't really know other than through Facebook interactions. I may have been on a call or two with her. She also finds a large part of her identity in Christianity. Politically, she aligns to the left. It's always appeared that she's had a strong relationship with Carolyn, but I've never asked either about their connection. I often try to bring the two of them into the same conversation. While Carolyn respects me, I'm still an outsider, while Lucy is one of her own. In other words, I yield to let Lucy do the heavy lifting while I try to act like the bridge. I think a structure designed to support and grow small working groups, such as one with these three characters, could have positive effects. And I'm going to share this because this is something I've tried over the years to create hundreds of these interactions, way too overwhelming for somebody, and I stopped doing it a long time ago. This one seemed pretty easy. The next step would be for somebody greater than myself to come in and use this as a template. Because I think it was Mark that was talking about preparing by having that safety net. Part of having that safety net is having people in all the different places that will also have your back, even though you're not necessarily in there in group, and I can't stress that enough. And it's not an either or approach. It's a both and. There has to be something working to get the people on the ground. Not right now, the people on the ground is, if I'm just going to simplify, it's like two groups. They're the not so bright ones looking to their leaders, whoever their leaders may be. Whether or not their leaders are smart, that's not for me to say. But what I am saying is when you stop the blockages in the discourse and you allow more conversation to come out, like I heard, I forgot who it was that said, what would happen if, like the education, somebody in that private group that I also put in the chat, I'm being censored from. It's run by a political person. And I'm literally being, for not, just for saying, hey guys, what do you think about these FBI agents being thrown out? Things benign like that, I'm being censored for because they understand that there are people there whose values are really to support law enforcement. And what I'm doing is I'm bringing out the disconnect, and it's sort of dividing the one group. And anyway, I don't mean to ramble, but I can't state enough how important it is to have some basic, simple starting points for everybody, because even smart people are biased, and we have to be able to bring out our own bias. And the few times it's happened on these calls, a lot of people have gotten really uncomfortable. And that's kind of sad, because we shouldn't be. We have to get more comfortable with saying, oh, and I see this, and oh, and I see that. It doesn't mean that that doesn't exist. It just means there's also another view. So thank you. Oh, let me see if I can figure out how to put this in. And if anybody reads it and is actually interested, I'd love to talk more about it. This is just one example.
Thanks, Stacy. Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you, but I don't know why I can't get it to, I copied and pasted it, but I can't.
Paste it into the chat?
Yeah.
Huh. I'm not sure. We're near the end of our call time. Stacy, keep trying. We'll figure it out. Klaus, thanks for joining us from your car today. You have the penultimate word, because after you, I'll go to Mr. Homer.
Yeah. So let me just give you one example that is sort of in line with what Stacy was just talking about. So I'm working with Shimon, and Shimon has a super ambitious project in the works, where he wants to connect with citizens. It's a civic engagement in every single congressional district, and provide tools for these folks to call their congressperson, to call their senator, with very specific messages that are related to healthcare, that are related to nutrition and the well-being of their children. So when I looked at what he was writing, because we're partnered on this, so I'm developing an AI capacity and an AI project called Farm Bill 2025, because much of that stuff is in the Farm Bill. So when I was looking at what Shimon was writing, it was way beyond the cognitive capacity of his target group. So I sent him the article that I wrote on the symbolic capitalists. And I wrote an article called The Trifecta. And that was based on the Facebook evaluation of the symbolic capitalist argument. And they crystallized that a phenomena happening in the last election is that 16% of working class people shifted their votes to Trump for the first time since the 60s. And so and then working with the AI really clarified that the lever, if the lever that you need to pull on is the working class American, people who are not very familiar with the political process, who are being manipulated. And that's actually the target group that Elon Musk absolutely honed in on, with micro-targeting efforts, AI-driven micro-targeting. So we rewrote it. We asked the AI to take what Shimon had written so far, and asked it shift the language of this text to address this particular target group, and we defined the target group. And something came out that was just completely rewritten, wonderfully simple, within the context of the people we are trying to reach and work and reach out to. So those are projects that we could do in the NeoBook project, for example. Write your own story, in a nugget context. We can provide you with frames. See, so there is a structural frame in my last submission to Pete. I wrote something about here is how you can structure your engagement in a meaningful way, and you can be anywhere within that ladder. You don't have to be at the top. You don't have to be at the bottom. You know, you put yourself into the system where you are most comfortable to function. Right. So with that, I think I'm complete.
Thank you, Klaus. And thank you, everybody. Really appreciate today's call. Ken.
For anybody considering calling Congress, Heather Cox Richardson today reports that the switchboard is receiving 1,600 calls an hour compared to the 40 an hour they usually get, and they're overwhelmed. And you'll probably get a message saying, "We can't answer the phone and the voicemail's full."
And
Don't give up.
those numbers are for one congressional office.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
don't give up. It's tough to find a poem for today. I'm going to shift the frame from the immediate concerns of what's happening in Washington to the immediate concerns of what's happening with the planet. Persephone Explains Global Warming by Janine Hall Gailey. She has realized all these years in hell have made her powerful. She whirls back from the underworld, skirts made of flowers, but also now flame. She dares the sun to come closer, first with the moon, unfazing the tides. She offers fruits to passers-by, out of season. Mango, blood orange, avocado, overripe pineapple. She blisters the trees with her passing. It's not enough to bring back spring. Hurricanes, volcanoes, tornadoes, wildfires, tsunamis are all now in her dance. If the poles switch polarity, if the ice caps are melting, she'll be singing. Put the blame on Mame, boys, in a satin dress, a film noir femme fatale in black lipstick and hair like an orchid's tendrils. She is no longer a child, under the whims of mother and father. Less the patience of the earth goddess, but she's inherited her father's temper, his tendency to hurl lightning, to shatter lives for the tiniest infractions. She loves her blooms, but now also poison ivy, parasitic plants, algae, and things that thrive on smoke and uncertainty, resilient even under the constant threat of death, like herself.
Wow. Ken, thank you.
That was really good.
Lovely selection.
Link us, Ken, please.
Yeah, if you can.
I don't have a link for the poem, but I can post it to the list and you can.
Yeah, post it in the email or something.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I actually got that from, I subscribed to JAMA, free subscription. They have a poetry selection in every issue, and that was in one of their
JAMA, the medical JAMA?
Yes, Medical JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association.
Yeah.
You don't get all of their poems, but sometimes you get the full one, and that was one of the ones that they published, and I just thought it was phenomenal.
Yeah. So this link is as close as I got to the poem, which mentions the poem but doesn't have the text of the poem in it.
Yeah.
At JAMA. Some of us don't need to get immediately to something. Ken, would you mind reading that to us again?
Sure.
Thank you.
Persephone Explains Global Warming by Janine Hall Gailey. She has realized all these years in hell have made her powerful. She whirls back from the underworld, skirts made of flowers, but also now flame. She dares the sun to come closer, flirts with the moon, unfazing the tides. She offers fruits to passers-by, out of season. Mango, blood orange, avocado, overripe pineapple. She blisters the trees with her passing. It's not enough to bring back spring. Hurricanes, volcanoes, tornadoes, wildfires, tsunamis are now all in her dance. If the poles switch polarity, if the ice caps are melting, she'll be singing, "Put the blame on Mame, boys," in a satin dress, a film noir femme fatale in black lipstick and hair like an orchid's tendrils. She is no longer a child under the whims of mother and father, less the patience of an earth goddess, but she's inherited her father's temper, his tendency to hurl lightning,
to shatter lives for the tiniest infractions. She still loves her blooms, but now also poison ivy, parasitic plants, algae, and things that thrive on smoke and uncertainty, resilient even under the constant threat of death, like herself, like she herself.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate the call. Open to other framings for how to approach this subject. This one didn't work all that well as I started it, and I hadn't planned a strategy or anything like that, but talking about how to frame was possibly not a good place to start, but let's I think we should stick with the subject. It seems like a timely and useful thing to do. With that, let's go back to our real world weeks, and thank you very much. Really appreciate it.